This all
Okay.
Hey, so hi everybody. Hi all you Wild Bill swim fans. I'm Jen Yorzik-Trichet, the founder of the Wild Bill Swim, and I'm here today with Jennifer Dutton, who is originally from New England, from Eastern Mass area, now's living in Florida, has been a swim coach for 40 some years, I think.
30, probably 30 years.
Some years. Yeah, between high school and club teams back in the day, focusing on masters for the last 28 years. She also focuses on open water swimming. So she will do a lot of pool sessions, but with the intent that an open water swim is what you're really wanting to do. Jen runs 7 different clinics this year in Florida, in France, and this summer in Vermont. So that's for you local people. That's going to be great for you if you're interested. She also does one-on-one coaching, stroke analysis, and workout planning. And we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of those things. And then you can go further. I'll let you know where you can find some more personal information for if you want to go deeper into this. Now, today our focus is going to be current pool training, because most of us are still in a pool, for 5K swims, 10K swims, and 10-mile swims, because they're not all, you can't train for a 10K the way you train for a 5K. Similarities, but distances, monthly distances, weekly distances are different. And that's where Jen is going to start, and we'll go through this. So Jen, thanks for coming. Really, it's been
Thanks.
a while. We're going back and forth. Been wonderful to get to know you for
Yes.
the last 20 minutes and through all that. And so maybe you can just start with a very general overview about 5, 10, and 10 mile, and then we can break it down step by step.
Right. So I think of things in terms of the time that they're going to take.
Mhm.
So the time that it's going to take someone to do a 5K, so that's 3 miles. So maybe you're an hour and a half person. So we're going to train for something that's going to take an hour and a half, and not necessarily in the distance itself. Because as we know, the distance between distance in the pool and distance in open water may or may not actually correlate. Probably not. And then, so the 10K obviously is probably a little more than twice your 5K pace. Although for some of us who are very steady, maybe just about twice. And then a 10 mile is a whole nother beast because that's going to take longer than 3 hours, right? That's going to take a good amount of time, and you're going to have to think about nutrition and hydration and things that are minor factors in the shorter ones. But in a 10 mile, that starts to be about
Yep.
a few different things: kayaker, so support crew, and also nutrition and hydration. So
Okay.
becomes a
So
little
maybe
different.
we should talk about that one last
Yeah.
and focus on the 5 and 10K, because I know that in the 10Ks I've done, I had to stop at 6K in order to hydrate. I think
Yes.
like electrolytes were my big thing because I was
Yeah.
tanking and getting cramps,
Yeah.
right? And I'm somebody who's really hydrated. So that's great that we're going to talk about that. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So do you want to start with 5K and 10K and then touch briefly
Yep.
on Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, as you're training for a 5K and a 10K, I'm going to kind of use those together. So, you want to start thinking about obviously building your cardio base at this time of year. Yeah, you're swimming laps, you're just kind of getting in the pool. You're lucky to get into a pool. If you have, weather conditions, if you don't have a pool nearby, you're just happy to be there. Um, and you're spending that time moving in the water, which is really important. But a lot of time your heart rate may not be getting so high. So as you want to start to build your base, start adding in a little bit some pickups, right? You don't have to drop dead sprint. And probably that's not going to be, but yeah, on the perceived exertion chart that Jen you were just showing, it's the annoying level there. You need to hit that annoying level, which most of us don't want to do because it's annoying. Most of us don't do it on our own. It's very hard to convince yourself to go there. But if you train by yourself, you're kind of gonna want to put those in there and kind of start sprinkling those in your workouts. And even if you say, all right, once a week, I'm gonna do a workout where I do some little up and down in terms of intensities, and maybe put some rest in. I have people who don't want to do rest, right? And that's fine, but you're only going to swim one way if you don't stop and rest and you don't change your speed and change your focus. I do a lot of training with 50s because I like being tied to a clock, and so I have to be accountable. And I
Mhm.
train by myself, so doing 50s, and also I it kind of gives me a chance to focus each time. If I have about 4 seconds rest, your body doesn't know that you're not swimming a continuous swim. So you could do things on very short rest and it will be as worthwhile, probably more, I think, mentally more worthwhile than doing just getting in and repeating, 3 times 1,000 descend, which descend would mean that you're going slow on your first one, a little faster and a little faster. There's a place for that. There's definitely a place for that, but not every day. So trying to mix it up day to day is going to be probably your first step as you start to train for longer distances. Um, Getting a little bit of stroke critique is also good because anything, I think I was trying to calculate how many strokes and I was probably doing this while I was swimming, so I'm sure I never actually arrived at an answer. But how many strokes I would do in 6 kilometers if I did, X strokes per length? But it's a lot of strokes, and if you're not doing them with good form, that's gonna haunt you in the end. Um, so you want to make sure that you're doing things really safely and efficiently, and having someone look at you and just make sure you're not doing anything kind of funky. Um, but for all the distance things, the biggest thing I do when people come, even if they're coming to do an Ironman triathlon, which is 2.4, so not even 5K, right? Is I'll take away the kick, pretty much. That's a big, everyone, you look at the swimming websites and it's all about the kick and it's all about this. And your son and my kids, yes,
Yeah.
who've been swimming since they were little, they're doing short things. Their ankles are like, their ankles are like this. Yes, have at it. Most of us need to not do that and need to basically be able to balance our bodies without using kick as a propulsion, or even worse, using kick to balance your body and keep you up. If you're doing that, you're going to be frantic, A, mentally, and B, you're going to be out of breath because those kicking uses a lot of really large muscle groups. So the first thing I would do is take away that kick, really. Kicking with a kickboard, in 30 years, I have never assigned kicking with a kickboard. It's one of my pet peeves. Um, I'm sure there are uses for it, and someone could argue with me, and that's totally fine. Um, but it's not something I would put into a workout if I were starting to train for a 5 or 10K. You could do some kicking with fins, on your back, on your side, just to work body position and core strength. I just got some fins myself for the first time in like 10 years. And so I'm working on my core strength by doing some dolphin kick on my back in streamline with the fins on. And that's pretty hard, actually. But that's really good core strength. So, doing a little bit of kick just as an integration with the core I think, is totally valuable. Um, but
Can I ask a
find,
que can I ask
yeah,
a question about core
of
strength?
course.
Because I'm
Yeah.
not sure that people will understand the link between, core strength and swimming,
Yes.
uh, but it's body position, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And so you're this vessel,
Mhm.
and you have two ends of the vessel, and if the middle starts to sag, usually it sags more, it'll arch. But if the middle gives way, you're done. And especially in open water, in long course, you can't fake it as much. Our pool here goes long course and short alternating, and the people who aren't as efficient love the short course because there's a wall, and
Yeah.
you can push off the wall and you get this momentum every couple, every little bit. Um, but yes, you can't fake it in open water. There's nothing to push off of. A wetsuit does help you fake it. So if you wear a wetsuit, that is an exoskeleton. So that does a lot of work for you. But even if you're going to put on a wetsuit, learning to organize your core first and keep your glutes and your posterior chain, keep this all really nice and stable. If you put a wetsuit on top of that form, you're going to be even better, right? So I'm aware that, I work with a lot of triathletes and I know they're going to put neoprene on, but there's
Mhm.
no need to let it
Sag.
swim for you. Like you can be better with it or without it. Um, So I kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, so 5 and 10K. So taking
Yes.
away the kick, starting to do some efficiency drills. You could start doing some distance per stroke, like counting your strokes, and play around with that. Um, you don't want to exaggerate too much because then you start doing some weird reaching and over finishing. You end up doing so. You don't go too crazy with the distance per stroke, but it is kind of fun to be like, okay, today, yesterday I did 21. Today I'm doing 23. Why would that be? And when you go faster, you're going to do more strokes, which is totally normal. But you can play around with having some stroke count stuff because you definitely want to get the most out of each stroke.
Mhm.
Alternate breathing is another really handy tool for open water, no matter what distance you're doing. Um, I'm aware that the Olympians do not alternate breathe, and yes, I heard all about that, and I'm sure you did too all summer. And they're fast, despite the fact that they're doing that, not because of the fact that they're doing that. Um, but also, they don't have to see a boat that's on the other side of them, or have waves coming from the other side. So there's a little bit when you're in open water, you need to be able to not be completely blind on one side. Um, if you've ever done an along the shore ocean swim and it's on your wrong side, you will find out what I mean pretty quickly. And I've done it and it's pretty awful. So under duress, you may always, I still, after all these years, I still go left under duress, but I can go right if I need to see what's happening over there. Or if the boat fumes are coming, if boat fumes are coming and I have no choice and I got to go right, I can. Or if my husband decides that he doesn't want to kayak on that side anymore and he wants to really be over here, things happen and the sun is in your face, that, there are all these things. So learning to be able to breathe on both sides is really important.
Okay,
Um,
but you're not saying that people should alternate breathe all the time because
no,
that's an old tale.
yeah, not necessarily. No, I think, but the ability to do. I have my people play with like breathe twice on one side, like Sarah Thomas, who's done the EC 4 times. So she does two on one side, two on the other, two on one, and that's actually a really nice distance pattern. You're getting a lot of air, and you can see a lot,
Right.
um, and it balances. It does balance your shoulders out. Um,
Mhm.
I find if I breathe every three, I can't keep up my tempo very well. My tempo actually slows down to breathe every three, which isn't
Right.
great because my tempo is already pretty slow. Um, so yeah, so you can play with that and see what you like for a breath pattern. But no,
Yeah, and
breathing every
also
three,
because
not
we are
necessarily.
swimming such distances, we need the oxygen,
Yes.
right?
Oh, definitely.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
why your tempo probably slows down because you're less
Yes.
oxygen.
Yes.
And
And
what I've heard
usually,
in a lot of the swimmers that swim with us is that, "Oh, I really need to, breathe every 3." And I'm like,
yeah.
"Well, you're swimming in the lake. It's really okay as long as
Yeah.
you can see," right? They
Yes.
need to be able to see something that's
Yep.
important. Yeah.
And as long as your stroke doesn't suffer, right? Because if you breathe one way, most of us, myself included, if I start to get tired, I'm always going to veer way too far right, and I have to be able to fix that. And a lot of me fixing that would be if I start breathing on my right, I'm not going to go right.
Right.
You have to kind of know also that your stroke is balanced enough to take it.
Mhm.
So that would be the main thing with being able to breathe on both sides too, is that you can get over onto both sides equally.
Right.
And that's what like Katie Ledecky does, right? She can get onto both sides, so she can breathe whenever she wants because she's not losing any power.
Right.
Most of us scoot through one or the other. But yeah, so playing with the breath, I'll do like 100 breathing, 10 strokes on one side. I'll go 25 breathing only right, 25 breathing only left, and then a 50 breathing every three. Like, just to kind of break down hundreds and stuff and to play with that pattern. Um, playing with some new patterns.
Mhm.
And it also, yeah, like I said, changes your stroke. So that's really good. To take away the kick, add the air,
Yeah.
um, adding sighting is going to be important for all the distances. Although, if you have a kayaker, it's not as important to sight. In fact, I kayak for an event down here, and the people sighting drive me crazy. My guy doesn't. He looks at me, and that's what he's supposed to be doing. But the people sighting drive me crazy because they're all like swimming their own thing, and their kayakers are following them, and nobody knows what's going on. And so, let the kayaker sight. If you got a kayaker, I mean, you could sight, but you really don't need to, and you probably shouldn't. Just if you trust your kayaker, let them do the sighting and just be able to follow them. So for all these distances, if you're having a kayaker, you need to learn to swim alongside the kayaker, which is a whole different animal. You can't really do that in the pool, but just be aware that, when you start zoning out, and let yourself zone out some days, but for all these things, if you're preparing for open water, give yourself some mental exercises at this time of year too, where you're staying awake and you're staying aware. That's why I like the breath pattern stuff, because I think it forces me to stay in my body and not, completely dissociate. Because I know in open water I'm going to have to pay attention.
Mhm.
So getting used to not just being like, okay, out there, I'll see you in 30 minutes. I don't know what
Mhm.
happened. Um, but keeping that awareness of my body, and of what's happening around me.
Mhm.
Um, Not every day, but it's good to keep that in mind. So for a 5K, say it's going to take you, kind of decide how long it's going to take you. If you've swum a mile, if you're doing a 5K, you've probably done a mile before. So take your mile time ish and multiply it by 3, and then add a little bit, because you're going to add a little bit. And that's sort of what you can guess. I mean, in a lake versus an ocean, you could have tides, you could have currents. There's so many variables, but give yourself what your time probably will be, and maybe a coach could help you with that, or and be realistic. Don't do your goal time. Like, okay, if my goal time is 1:20 for a 5K, but my probable time is a 1:30, don't aim at the 1:20, because that doesn't make any sense. Do the 1:30 really well and be prepared for 1:30, because a lot of times it's going to take longer than you thought. Almost, almost never do you get out and go, oh, that was quicker. Oh, that was quicker than I thought. Like, I mean, because people don't measure right, the buoys get blown off course. You never expect it. Um, I've done Kingdom Swim a million times, and it's always longer than,
That's good to
than
know,
average
'cause
time.
there's a group of us going to the Kingdom Swim this
Oh yeah,
year.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's great. It's fantastic, and Phil does a great job. But I've been
yeah.
with him since the beginning, and it's that 15 I'm like, it's 16. All right, I'm
I
gonna argue
know.
this every so yeah, but it's never what it's supposed to be in open water, and you just have to go with that. So yeah, so make your time that you're probably gonna do, and train with that in mind. So train with, all right, I need to be able to do, if an hour and a half is my 5K, say 2 hours. Say if 2 hours is my 5K, um, I'm going to want to eventually, as my longest swim, do probably 1.5. And I'd feel pretty good about that if I got up to a 1.5 hour swim. And a lot of I use times, because, like I said before, but also because I do spend some time swimming on a tether. And I started doing that during COVID for obvious reasons, when we had lockdown. I still do it here because the pools get really hot and I don't like it, so I have it tied to my tree. It actually, we lost it. It kind of fell apart, so we're having a new one coming. But just a little Intex pool on a tether. So using time makes sense, because you have no distance for that. But doing an hour and a half, if you're aiming for a 2 hour 5K, an hour and a half would be about the longest I would want to do a swim. And that swim hopefully will be in open water. Sometimes it's not possible. If I were doing this and I had to do it in a pool, and I couldn't get to open water to prepare, I would probably do it as 3 30-minute blocks, where I
Okay.
could hydrate between, like, so that I would get mentally ready to go for a half hour, without stopping. It's pretty lonely, and for all these events, you need to get used to talking to yourself and not stopping. So even if you're in a pool and you have ends, you need to be alone, and you need to be talking to yourself and working on what you're saying to yourself, alone for amounts of time. And so I would do 3 30-minute blocks, and, you know, work up to that maybe, but see if you could do that. And that way you're simulating, like, when you would take a drink. 5K, I probably wouldn't do anything solid. I'd probably just do liquid, but still mentally really nice to know it's coming. Um, and to give yourself those chunks of time, that's a lot. It really messes with your head. And so I do a lot of, 1 day a week I'll swim. I'll do, like, when I'm training, I'll probably do a couple hours in the pool long course, and just just put my snorkel. I just have the front snorkel and I just swim straight through. No hydration, no nutrition, nothing. And just to get used to being by myself and talking to myself and making sure I'm not saying anything really mean to myself while I'm doing that. And because you can decide what to think about. So you
Mhm.
gotta, sometimes some days you have to be like, now I will think about how proud I am of my, you know, children, and or whatever gets you going, and sometimes that's what you have to do. So that's for any of these distances, I would start rehearsing those chunks of time.
So we have an expression, that is on the back of our T-shirts. I'll mail you a T-shirt after this. That is, "Access to success is through the mind."
Yes,
That's one of
very
our
much.
taglines. We have got a lot of taglines, and
Yeah.
we're all, but that's one of them. And that's kind
That's,
of
yes.
my personal family motto has been that for
Yeah,
years.
that sounds like a that would be, yes, it's definitely very, very mental. My daughter has started ice swimming, and she said it's very, she likes she likes how it's such a challenge to kind of calm her heart rate down.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I mean, it is definitely, you need to calm down, as
Mhm,
Taylor Swift would say. But so for all these things, that is, yes, taking away the kick, getting efficient,
mhm.
being able to breathe and see what's happening on both sides of you if you need to.
Yeah.
That could lead to, and then the chunks of time alone.
Mhm.
And citing, which I started to say about citing was, you could add that, and what you want to do is add that to another reason to bilateral breathe sometimes, is so you have the flexibility to, if I really only sight well on with my right hand in front,
Yeah.
but playing around with trying to sight a little bit in the pool, and having that catch up stroke, really having that hand that stays in front of you during, not breathing, but during the sight, having the hand stay in front of you and keeping that balance. So
Right.
working on catch up and making sure that you're kind of front quadrant, as they used to call it, um, front quadrant in swimming. And if you take away the kick, you're gonna be more front quadrant. But
Right.
adding in the sighting is really also wise. Um,
I think that's a great point that you brought up because I've told so many beginning open water swimmers, they think you sight when you breathe.
yes,
You don't.
yes, no,
You
do not.
sight, you
Yep,
start, and then you breathe, or
yes.
before and
Or
after.
yeah, you either breathe sight or you sight breathe,
Sight, breathe,
or
or
yeah,
it all works out, but it's not at the
yeah.
same.
No, because if you do that, then everything else will fall down. You're not going to be happy.
Right.
That's
You
going to be
lift your
really
head too far
unfortunate.
out of the water, your butt sinks, your feet
Yep,
sink, and the whole
yep.
cycle
And
is,
then
and
you
if you're
recover, and
like,
then you do it again. Yeah.
right, and then you finally recover, and then you start all over
Yes.
again, and
Yep.
then so the whole race, the whole
Oh yeah,
event distance is swum in
it's
recovering
miserable.
from fighting.
And people
So
are like, why does my low back hurt? It's like, well, if you pick up your face, your low back is going to hurt. And that
right,
is something that will come when you start, every year when I transition into open water. The low back, you do feel some different things just from not having that nice wall to crunch. There's that nice little flexion
yes,
of your hips every
mhm,
single wall.
mhm,
And doing without that changes your stroke a little bit. So, but yeah, adapting to that kind of catch up kind of stroke for all those
mhm,
reasons is going to be really wise.
yes.
Um, and yeah, so chunks of time. And so yeah,
So
I would,
what about
yes,
the
ask me.
10K? So you mentioned it, how you calculate like your weekly or monthly max distance, longest swim
Yep.
for a 5K. What about a 10K?
So for a 10K, I'm going to say, so say that's 6 miles. So say you are doing, okay, a 4 hour, say your estimate is about, say 4 miles. And I'm like a nervous Nelly. So I usually estimate more than it's probably going to take me, just because I feel better if I prepare for more.
Right.
Um, and so I'll say, all right, so 4 hours, if that's my probable 10K, then I'm gonna probably swim up to, I'd probably do three. I might not go up to 3.5 hours, but I would definitely, to make myself feel good, I'd probably go to over three.
Mhm.
And it depends. It might be a beautiful day, and
Yeah, it feels good. You're
you
with
know,
somebody else,
yeah,
whatever.
yes.
And you would do that once before?
I'd probably do, yeah, I would do it once. I would edge up. I would take my long swims. So I divide my week into, I swim 4 times a week usually. And space them out, and I have land exercise on the days in between, and one day off. And so I have that long swim on the weekend. And that's kind of what I think of as my rehearsal.
Mhm.
So if I'm preparing, I'm going to start like soon. I'm going to actually start to, right now I'm swimming about 2 hours each swim. And then I'm going to take one of those swims and I'm going to edge it up. When my kids were in school and they were little, I did my long swims on Fridays because for obvious reasons, once they went to school, I would try to do it so I didn't disrupt the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Um, so you pick your day, and that swim's gonna start edging a little bit longer, make it a little more boring so that you get the mental thing. Bring your nutrition, start to practice that, and but have that one swim a week where you edge a little bit longer each time, and I wouldn't add more than probably 15 minutes at a time for that one. But you can keep, and I got this originally from, I think ultra. I want to say ultra running because when I first started doing this, there wasn't really the internet, there wasn't really all this information. So I started taking it from like everyday ultra marathon running, which is keep your normal life, except for that one really big one. Um, and so the big one starts pretty small and it's going to grow a little bit. But I find that to be a really reasonable way to train.
Mhm.
Um, and then maybe it becomes back to back. Let's say if you're going a 10K, you could go two swims in a day to make up that time if you have things that come up, or you could have a even a nighttime. Like I've done a swim at night on like my tether, swim at night, and then swim real early the next morning, and kind of have them be real close together.
Mhm.
Physically, that can save your shoulders.
Mhm.
Mentally, that can be also really nice. And if you have a life to live, like I said, and you need, you know, so getting the hours in doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, oh, I need to do 3.5 hours in a lake in
Today.
a day, it doesn't have to be quite like that. And
Right.
being easier on most of us are not, can be a little easier on ourselves with that and be like, all right, if I'll go to masters, I can go to the lake for an hour and then I can go to masters. So that's 2.25 hours. So right there, that's 2.25 hours. So maybe that's your long day for the week. Like, don't lose the masters, don't lose the enjoyable things,
Right. So
for,
basically, what you're saying is get your body used to being in water for that
yep.
period of time over a 24-hour period kind of
Yeah.
thing, or
So
12-hour
time under tension, as they
time
say.
under
Yeah. So
connection.
I'd
Yeah.
right. So like in a 12 hour, so right, 24 hours or 12 hours, it start to kind of cram them a
Right.
little bit closer together. And so maybe by the end of your training for a 10K, by your biggest week, which is maybe 3 weeks out, most of us don't need more than 3 weeks to rest. So I'm going to peak about 3 weeks out, and I might do like a 2 hour on Friday and then a 3.25 hour on Saturday morning. So I have more than the hours, right? Within 24. That's probably going to make me feel pretty confident. Um, and it'll be like hard enough that I'm going to feel pretty accomplished and pretty good about it, and but not mistakenly so. I don't think that's a false confidence. I think that's an appropriate confidence booster.
Right.
But
And
yeah,
that would
so
just be
having them.
straight swimming, not any kind of
Yep.
if
Just
straight
that's
swimming.
just either some 30-minute chunks in a pool, or that's in the lake if I can get there,
Yeah.
or on the tether 30-minute chunks,
Okay.
between breaks. Um, and but yeah, pool, and one of those probably is a pool, and the other one's the lake. Like that's usually how it would end up for me in Boston, was that I could get, especially early in the season, because the lake may not be like we were saying in May. It's like
Yeah.
always wanted to get it on Mother's Day. It hardly ever happened. Like, and
Yeah.
definitely I was alone, and and so yeah. So you hope for the best weather, but sometimes you just don't get it. And June could be a disaster, or June could be really amazing weather. We just don't know in New England how things are going to go. So
Right.
um, it might be a pool, and that's fine, and just kind of but making it as event like, I don't want to say race like because maybe it's not really a race, but event like as possible, and start to set up your drinks, set up your, kind of have your breakfast, have your, play around, notice what you ate the night before. A lot of times on that swim on Sundays, I really realized that I did stupid things on Saturday and didn't drink any water because I didn't work out. Like it's more what you did the day before, and it starts to become more obvious, which is great because you need all those you need all those teachable moments for yourself, and start noticing the patterns.
Mhm.
If you had too much wine, if you had this, if you had this,
Right.
and sometimes you have an amazing swim when you get up, you've had no sleep, you have a migraine, you have whatever, and you get in the water, you're like, this is going to be so bad, and it's amazing, and for no reason, and then some days you get in and you've done everything perfect, and you're just like, when is this going to end? It's just like, what's happening? When is this going to end? So you just don't know how it's going to play out. So get up and do it. Get up and go. If you've got it planned and you can get there, you go. You just
Yeah.
do. You just go. You put your bathing suit on, you walk out the door, you put the key in the, well, you don't do ignitions anymore, but you press the button on your car
Right.
and
Right.
you just get yourself to that pool. That's what I say to kids that I coach too. That I say to their parents, like, just slow the car down, put them, get the kid out of the car
Yeah.
with me,
Yeah.
just leave them with me and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, but it's worth it just to go miserable and go when you haven't had any sleep. Do it. I mean, because if you can do that, that's all about building that mental kind of reservoir.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
So you mentioned, you swim 4 days a week, you have 2 days of dry land and then a
yeah,
day off. So, and I'm sure your 4 days a week are cycled differently. So you've got
mhm,
one long swim day, typically, not
yes,
like just before the swim. So
yep,
what would, like, how would you segment the other days? I'm going to share the link with everyone for this book here
okay,
that Jennifer has written.
great,
It's first the solo swimmer. It's got a bunch of sets. All the workouts are around 2000 plus yards, but it's
yep,
also got the exertion gauge, which you will love. It's really funny and
yeah,
true.
yeah.
So, but and it just as an overall, like how would you segment some of that stuff? The
So
four.
I'm gonna say, so the long one is the long one, but the other ones I'd say, all right. So one of the short days, I'll probably, what I'm doing right now is playing with. I just added, like I said, I just got some fins, and so I'm doing some dolphin kicks. So like today, I had about 600 yards of meters of kick somewhere in the workout. I kind of put those in just to make myself do that. And yesterday I did 6K, and I did 3K straight, and I tried to make it in an hour because that's for me. That's if I
Mhm.
could do. I'm in a short course meters pool yesterday, and so if I was doing 3,000 in an hour, I thought that was a pretty good clip for me, and a pace that I could hopefully maintain. So I did the first half of my workout yesterday all in one shot in that hour, and then I broke it down and did actually just 50s. I just did 50s on a minute, so I kind of kept that same pace. That's a pace for me that I know if I can hold it, that's kind of what I want to be holding over hours and hours and hours. So I'm starting to get a little more aggressive as we turn into spring with
Mhm.
holding a certain pace. Whereas all winter I was sort of just like, yeah, just swimming, and I would do some things on an interval, but
Mhm.
there was nothing really riding on that interval. And so now I'm more like, okay, I want to make sure that my cadence. Yesterday, I really focused on trying to pick up my cadence from what was really comfortable, like really comfortable. And so I took it up a notch. So
Right.
one day a week, I would try to kind of take up that cadence a notch and test myself a little bit with the clock.
Mhm.
Um, and another day, I'm probably going to test mentally. I have paddles that don't have any straps, and so
Okay.
I've been assigning my master swimmers duties in my camps. But there's some really good catch exercises that I've been doing with those paddles, those naked paddles. um, and I do use my front snorkel.
Mhm.
I like that. The chiropractor recommends that. But if I have a swim coming up, I'll start doing away with the front snorkel because I need to get used to the head. I need to get used to the head turning, otherwise it's going to really hurt.
Right.
Um, but for this time of year, I'm still about half my yards probably with the snorkel,
Yeah.
maybe a little less. I'm starting to ease out of that.
Yeah.
I don't really do a sprinty workout, but yeah, some workouts are a little more lackadaisical, and I'll just sort of try to cycle
So
those.
would you say that, like, in the different kind of perceived exertions, there should be
Yeah,
some that, like what you just described in terms of cadence would be, for example, 5K race pace.
right.
That would be
Yep,
possibly one, which is the
yep,
tempo and the short rest.
yeah,
Then once in a while, power on demand, right? Like
yes. Yep.
building up racing to a mile. Like the
Yep.
people racing a mile, we're not really talking about them today, but
Yeah.
that's really basically you just
That's
when the thing
Yep.
goes, you just go all out. It's
And you
just like
just
it's
go
20, 30
to
minutes,
the
you just do
right.
what you
You
right.
go to the
And you
first
can't
buoy, and then you go to the
right,
second buoy, and then you just go like, yeah, you're
right.
basically
And, and
yeah.
honestly, this past summer, I was ready to do, I forget which distance it was. And I woke up in the morning and I'm like, I don't feel like I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to move it to a mile. I'm going
Yep.
to do a mile. And I swum my ass off and I
Yeah,
timed like
yeah.
crazy. And I came in second.
Nice.
I'm like,
That's
good
fun. Yeah,
about that. That was the right
that's
decision for that day.
yes. Sometimes
Right.
you gotta listen. Yeah, I mean, definitely a mile is for people like that we're talking about. It is a sprint, essentially, really, right? It's like all out. That's that really annoying, like, I don't know if I could do this much longer. All right, let me just try for 100 more strokes. Like,
Right.
where you're sort of talking yourself into staying at this threshold where you're like, I don't really like it here, and then you go, all right, let me just go a little bit longer. Let me just go a
Right.
little bit longer.
Right.
Whereas a 5K, you're like, okay, this is this that pace that you can hold for an hour and a half or 2 hours
Mhm.
if you had to, like they say on Peloton. And I do that
Right.
on my I like to hear the teachers on Peloton. Some of them are very good
Oh, some of them are amazing.
with thing,
Yeah.
I guess. So I do like a lot of them are good about, to give you things to think about. But yeah, so a pace that you can hold. But yes, to move up my baseline, I do need to start as my poor husband who has to watch me swim in
Yeah.
excruciating fashion is like, can you please get faster? So of course I'm in an age where I am not going to get faster really,
Right.
but I
It's like, suck it up, buttercup.
things happen. Yeah. So he says no more 24 hours. So we're not doing any more overnight swims.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's
Yeah.
that's the best I can do for him. But yes, so I'm trying to quicken my natural pace a little bit because I know I tend to just kind of like do do
Yeah.
do, and so trying to hold myself accountable to the clock a little bit more than I would like to. Yes.
Right. So what we've talked about in our group is we've noticed because a lot of us just like to get in the water and swim.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
And
Yeah.
that's part of the social aspect. We wait for each other when we swim a mile, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which our second swim in a week is going to change that up a little bit. But when we're planning to do more events together,
Mm,
because when you're going to go with someone, it's like it's less intimidating because you're going to know
yeah.
other people there. But the
Definitely.
more events that you do, the more your pace and your cadence gets practiced because you've
Yeah.
got other people that you're swimming
Yeah.
with who are some of them are you're gonna draft off some of them. You're gonna see them
Yep.
going by. It's like I'm not gonna let that person go by. And
Yes, you do.
it's
Yeah.
just sporadic, but
Yep.
that that is what we've been talking about that
Yeah.
we will hopefully be helping us out a little
And
bit.
and if you have a kayaker, that can really help too because they can be like, okay, let's take this. And when I kayak, I do that. I'll be like, all right, see that guy? We're gonna take him down now. We're done. We're done sitting behind these people. Let's go. Like
Okay,
let's.
well, that's a
And my
great idea.
husband will do that too. He's like, okay, can we just please pass these people now? Like I can't watch this person's back any longer. You're behind the same person for like 2 hours,
Yeah,
and finally you're like, all right, we just got to go.
yeah,
So yes, certainly having some bursts and having that emotional, like
right.
kind of going with that emotional.
Yeah, and feeling like I
Yeah.
noticed with my kids too when they were younger, they had to get used to that feeling of your heart racing, your
Yes.
heart in your
Yeah.
throat. And you feel
Yes.
like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
bad. Heart attack. But you're not. That's just
Right.
exertion. And
That's
you
what
have
I
to
was.
learn
Yes.
how to swim through that, right?
I was
Yeah.
just saying that to someone today, like, because he's like, I feel like I'm drowning. I'm like, well, that's your brain. It's doing everything it can to make you stop. So, like, it's doing its job. It's trying to protect you and keep you from being, uncomfortable or being in danger. But you're actually fine. I'm telling you, you're fine. You look fine. But you're right. What you feel and right, coming to terms with those emotions that's a big part of the practice, and that's why having some workouts that are unpleasant and that are hopefully not painful. I don't really like the word the pain, but definitely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, having those kind of things are really important because you have to have, and I think that's why a lot of really good swimmers are over age 30 because they've been through some stuff. And I think looking at the women that I know, especially women who are open water legends, are just have been through some stuff, and you kind of build that resilience
Yeah.
and that kind of like all right, I could, I go and I'm like, I'm not getting fired up over this. I'm going to get in and I'm just going to go until I can't go anymore, and that's just what's going to happen. And I'm not getting, I don't get like really high or really low. I have to stay, I
Yeah.
did that in high school. I threw up all the time. I hyperventilated every single time. I was not a good racer. And so this is, for me to stay,
Yeah.
and that's so, yeah, but, and to manage those emotions is definitely something that hopefully your kids coach. And I know my kids had to learn that as well. And watching them, it was so hard as a parent to watch because you can't do it for them. They have to go through it. And
But you can't ignore them either. You can't
right. And
ignore
you can't also
them.
downplay it. I mean, because it's real, but
Right, it's real. Even
yeah,
in yourself, you could say you could maybe
yes,
think that, "Oh, no, I'm not nervous," just trying to talk
yeah,
yourself out of it,
yeah,
but it's actually not as effective as saying, "Okay, I need to breathe now.
yes,
I've done hard shit, I can
yes,
do,"
yep.
right? So
And the
it's
nerves are
coming
here
face
for a
to
reason.
face with your reality.
Yeah, and your nerves are here for a reason, and what you don't want is to shut down. You want your body to not swim like you hate it. Like there's a lot of connection between being happy, and so it's keeping it in the positive
Mhm.
makes your body respond better as your kids as the kids learn too. And it's like if you swim like you give up, you're done. Like that is never going to work. You have to have some hope, and you have to be able to have that positivity even if it's not really real. Your body doesn't know that you're faking it.
Right,
It doesn't
exactly,
know or
which most
care.
people don't understand that,
Yeah,
like, visualization is not just, a fun little practice.
right.
It's way more
No,
than
it's really, and that's what a lot of, I mean, I find a lot of my swimming to be, and I think as they're training for open water in the pool, a lot of what we're doing is visualizing what's going to be in the open water. And if you're not as familiar with the open water, you don't have as much a basis for this. But those of us who've done a good amount of open water, like I spend a lot of time in the pool, like not pretending, but definitely visualizing open water and what would I be doing right now. And, when these emotions come, and rehearsing kind of some of those things that happen. And yes, it's calm. It's not, there's hardly any turmoil, but a lot of visualization happens with the rhythm of your stroke, the movement of your body, the
Mhm.
what your eyes are doing. So there can be a lot of visualization and practice that happens every day. So it's super valuable, even though it's a pool and it feels like, I don't know, is this really? And that's what the tether stuff too. It was like, I helped a woman do the English Channel last year, and she was blind, and so she had to swim on a tether because it took her like 2 hours. She's in landlocked England, and it takes her 2 hours to get to the pool. Like, and she has the dog, she has a seeing eye dog, and the train, and the bus, and sometimes she just couldn't get there, and so she was like, has a pool in her basement, and she could just do the tether. And I was like, of course, that's perfectly good. I mean, it's great training. It's so boring. It's like excruciating, and but it's visualizing the whole time. You're just every hand stroke, how are you kind of checking in with yourself and rehearsing things that you can check in with yourself later. And I have my swimmers do like a body scan, kind of, hand to elbow to here to here to here, how's everything going, and keep kind of going through that as you're swimming in the pool. And you can use that in the open water as well, and then you'll remember it and you'll be like, okay, I know what we're doing now, and you can
Right,
sort of settle down. And
right.
um but yeah, I think visualization, it's almost not even conscious that I do that now. Now that you said that, I hadn't really thought of it, but now that you say that,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that actually is kind of like what I do. It's like, because I know I'm not training to swim in the pool, I know I'm training for something else. So
Right, right,
yeah,
and I think that's probably one of the great reasons to check in with a coach at this time of
yeah,
year because
hmm,
they're like, "Oh, yeah, you got your body position," and then you need to,
yes,
like, imprint that on your brain.
right,
What does that feel like, right?
yes,
How do I
yep.
feel in the water when I'm in that body position,
And
for
what do I do when I know I've gone off? Like when I
what
know that my legs are sinking, or I think my legs are sinking, then how do I respond to that? It's because you have to coach yourself in the open
right,
water. So you need to learn some things to say and some strategies.
yeah,
What we work on a lot is like, okay, how do you talk to yourself? But also, what do you say?
mhm,
Like if
yeah,
I say, making sure that your thumb's not dropping, it's like, okay, if I know I always veer right, then I need to make sure this left hand is staying more stable because I know I drop it. And
mhm,
so knowing where you go when you're tired and having a coach point that out is really helpful. And video is really good with that too. And if a lot of times if you see it, you go, whoa, I did not know I was doing that.
Mhm.
Um, but you can learn things to talk to yourself about, and some strategies and some things to keep yourself present in your body and not dissociation in a lot of ways is good, and it's a skill, but
Mhm.
there has to be a way also to stay in the here and now enough
Yeah.
that you can
Yeah.
figure out what you're doing.
Right. So
Yes.
I'd just like for a minute or 2 for you to touch on a 10 mile because I'm
Yeah.
doing 10 miles.
Yes, that's awesome. That's exciting. So yeah, so 10 mile is a little bit of a different beast, and because it's going to take probably a good a good amount of hours, longer than a marathon run probably would take. Although for me it might be about equal. But so you're going to need to really take nutrition seriously, because you are going to your body is going to tell you that it's running out of stuff. Hydrate before you think you need it, and it also provides a mental those hydration breaks are also really good for mental, knowing you have 30 minutes or whatever your minutes are until you're sorry, there's a plane going over. Um, but knowing that you're going to have in 30 minutes, you're going to make human contact. That's pretty nice
Right,
too. With your
right.
kayaker, having that moment, even though my kayaker just tells me to stop chewing and swim.
Yeah.
But it's okay. We're married, so it's all right. And so yeah, so having kind of those chunks of time. But yeah, so a 10 miler is going to be, and the one that you're doing is an oval course. So knowing the course is really important, because that can mess with you. So knowing the course and knowing that you're going to do this oval. So what the conditions you have on the way out are different than the conditions that you have going across are different than the conditions you have going back. So there's actually a few different swims happening in a loop course like that.
Mhm.
And you're only visiting each situation once, which is nice in a single loop. The,
Right,
the multiple loop ones can be tough, although they can be good because they're predictable. Once you know it, you know it.
right.
Um, so knowing that you're going to have this these longer periods of time, you're not really going to have people around. You might, because if you're going with someone that you swim with and you know you're together, but things can
Mhm.
happen, right? All of a sudden you think you're starting together, and then they lose their kayaker for a minute, and all of a sudden you're 5 minutes ahead of them, and they never really. And I mean, maybe you want to wait for them, but maybe you don't. So
Right.
you're alone a lot of that 10 miles, you and your kayaker and maybe one other swimmer. You're going to probably end up with one or two other swimmers that you can see the whole time. So that
Mhm.
sense of isolation is definitely going to be bigger on the longer the swim, the more isolated you kind of have that feeling. And trying to not get caught up in like we're half mile. Make sure you do not ask how far you are along. You may
Mhm.
know. I always think I'm going to count buoys and stuff. I never do. I never have been successful. I'm going to count buoys this time, so I know because I know you don't wear the watch and you don't really know where you are. And you hope your kayaker knows where you are, but in that course, it's pretty obvious. But do not ask where you are because it plays on your head so
Mhm.
big time. Because if you're
Mhm.
farther along than you thought, then you're like, yes, I'm going to set a world record. And then all of a sudden you turn, and then the headwind comes, and then you're screwed, and you start throwing up, and like it's over. And then you really get it's devastating. Or you're slower than you thought. My the guy driving my boat this year in Lake Constance he was German, and
Mhm.
he hadn't, I don't think, ever driven a boat for this. There was an observer, there was like all these other people, but the guy actually driving the boat had never seen anything like this.
Mhm.
And he actually told me that I was going too slow. Like Andy, my husband was kind of blocking him from talking to me, but at one point he did tell me that I was going too slow. And that got so in my head because I didn't know where we were. I mean, I knew that night it was a 40-mile swim. I mean, I was going slowly, yes, um, but it really got in my head, and I had never known my pace before. Like I'd never even thought of it.
Yeah.
So try not to understand how fast you're going or how slow you are going. Try
Mhm.
not to really, even if you try to ask, make sure your kayaker knows not to give in and not to tell you.
Mhm.
Um, you got to stay in the moment, and it's really vast. All of a sudden, you just go. you have to stay in the moment, and you have to stay in that feed, in that half hour or 40 minute, whatever you decide. And that's
Mm.
something to play with as you're training too, is like how long to go. If
Yes.
water is very cold, I might shorten because I want more physical. When I've done scar, sometimes it's very, very cold, it can be, and
Yep.
I've shortened things to 20 minutes, especially with a kayaker who didn't know me very well, because I needed to make sure that he needed to make sure I was okay, and I needed him to make sure I was okay.
Right.
um, but usually it's 30 minutes to 40 minutes, and you want to kind of play with what you can tolerate with that. And yeah,
Mhm.
maybe you say, I'm going to do after the first hour, and then I'm going to do every 30 minutes after that. Something, usually we do a big chunk at first just to
Mhm.
get through. You don't need anything for the first hour. You're fine.
Yeah.
You got a lot of figuring out to do. And
Right. And adrenaline and your
yeah,
pre-race prep are gonna
and you want
carry.
to be, and you want to read the rules on a 10 miler. You're going to have some rules about how to find your kayaker, how to do all that. You want to be kind of clear. I never listen to the rules, so I usually get there and I'm like in the water going, what did he say? Like, do not do that. So I do not recommend it. um, and yes, listen to the discussion of rules, or find out ahead of time, even better, because you're going to be too nervous, you're not going to really listen to what the route actually is. um, because yeah, your kayaker is going to set it, but you got to make sure your kayaker understands also that they should not be pushing. They shouldn't. They need to be at a certain place. So you want to do, you do for a 10 mile. I would definitely want to practice with a kayaker before I did that.
Right.
I
You
did
don't need to
kayak
be
for.
annoyed that they're too far or too
Oh my
close.
gosh, you have to get a system, and you need to, even if it's not the same person you're going to use, you need to be able to say, like, I've used a kayaker so much that I can be like, I want you on my left side, and I want your body, when I turn to breathe, I want your body to be right in my field of view, and that's where I need you to stay. If you're ahead of me, I'm going to get really sad and probably start to cry. If
Mhm.
you're behind me, I'm going to be really aggravated because I'm going to be blind.
Yeah.
So you need to know, as a swimmer, you need to know where you want them. Do you want them on
Yeah.
that side? Do you want them on that? Like, what's your preference? Do you have a preference? Do you,
Right.
like,
Mhm.
what do you want? So just learning so that you can tell them, you need to be able to articulate what you need from the kayaker,
Mhm.
and where you want them, because that can just be miserable. So also for the 10, yeah, so for the 10 mile, really that mental staying in the moment is huge. Because you'll start to think you're by yourself. You feel like you're alone, and you're probably last, and you're, missing the lunch, and you're, like all these things come, and you really have no idea of the passing of time.
Yeah.
And so trying not to tell yourself those stories, like trying not to have those stories become physical and become part of your
Right.
movement patterns, and trying to stay, and some of that is, you could tell your kayaker, if they know you well or if they don't, you say, do not let me say, like, if I ask you where we are, you do not tell me, like,
Right.
no matter what I say, do not tell me where we are.
Right here, right now.
Yes, that's, you are right here, and think about this music, like, play me some music, play me some, do something to distract me from my, if I start to get sad, because you're going to have this emotional, I think,
Mhm.
like, what people don't realize is, in any of these swims, but the longer the more so, you have this emotional journey that you go on during it,
Mhm.
and you're really all you have, even though you have a kayaker maybe there, but you're all you have, so you're going to go through this emotional. And when I first started, I thought it was like we were saying with the kids, it's like I thought it was, as soon as I got like sick, I get seasick a lot because I have brain injury history, so I throw up a lot. And
Mhm.
so it's, when I first started doing it though, I was like, oh, that's it, because I would get pulled from a swim as soon as I started throwing up, and I would just get so upset, and that would be worse. And
Right.
then all of a sudden I was like, wait, what if I just wait it out? I mean, like, I threw up, but I'm fine. I'm coherent. Like, I'm not, I'm not, didn't pass out. And I started to, my Lake Tahoe swim was for formative for me, because I stayed in even after those emotions started,
Mhm.
and you ride it out, and you
Yeah.
go, and your body is going through things too. At 6 hours, you start kind of transitioning into, from glucose to using some fat for fuel, and that's a pretty sad time. Like, sad, literally sad. You're actually sad. Or for
Yeah.
me, that's what, I get kind of sad at about 6 hours, and kind of like mopey, but then I'm going to come back, like, if I wait it out. But you don't know that until you know it, and so, but I think telling people one of the best things that I've been able to do once I could articulate this in more recent years was tell people they're going to have this journey where you're going to be like really sad and you're going to be, you may have a miserable moment, and the moment's going to go away though, but you'll have it, but be ready for it. It's fine. You're going to have it. It's not doing any damage. Everybody's fine, but you're going to have these moments. You're going to have the high, the ups and the downs, and but kind of letting them play out. Yoga taught me a lot about that too. Like when I first started taking yoga, many years ago, that really, those teachers taught me a lot about like waiting it out. Waiting that emotion out and staying with it longer. But that's a huge thing for like your 10 mile, because that's 6 hours or whatever that's going to take is it's a long time.
Yeah.
In the dark water, it's very sensory. There's
Yeah.
no sense. I have my eyes closed anyway, but even if I didn't, it'd be all brown. There's
Right.
no, it's very much a sensory deprivation situation. So you start to have some weird things and be like, oh, interesting, I'm having a weird thing. Okay. And like observe,
Yeah.
let it go, as they say in yoga, observe that, let
Right.
it go. Yeah, so I'm getting dark out here.
Yeah, I
Um,
can. Yeah.
but 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 yeah, I think as I knew that, as I started to be able to tell people that and warn people, like be able to be like, just expect this, it's going to
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And notice it, don't let it take over, but kind of let it do its thing, and then let it just kind of then start counting your strokes, and then just start counting. And
And
yeah,
so in terms of the way you calculated the longest swim and stuff like that for the
yeah,
5K, it's the same basic formula,
yeah,
is my
yeah,
guess.
just adding on, probably 5 minutes a mile type of thing.
Yeah.
And
Segment,
more.
I could do 3 swims in 1 day, something like
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So if I were preparing for a 6 hour swim, I'm going to say I'm probably going to do a five and a quarter, if I can do that in a day, right? I
right.
may not do a whole, I may do like a 4 and
Mhm.
then an hour later in the day. Like if I can get a 4 hour in, because that's all I can fit in, then
Right.
I then go home, have some lunch, and just do another hour, just tack on another hour that day. I'm going to be pretty happy with that. Yeah. Because that's going to be that's going to be more time, and especially if I swam the day before, or
Yeah.
but yeah, you just kind of playing around with that, and knowing it doesn't have to take over your life, but you may have a couple long days in there, but it shouldn't be awful. I mean, the training shouldn't be, you shouldn't hate it. You don't want to hate it. That's why you don't want to
Right.
swim every day. I mean, I feel like swimming every day becomes, then you're like, and you'll feel like
Yeah,
that a
once
little
it
bit on the
becomes a
last,
drag, yeah,
yeah.
then
I
it's
mean,
like yeah.
yeah.
And of
And
course,
the last
swimming with
couple
other
weeks,
people sometimes, here
yes,
and
that
there during the
helps.
week can be really helpful.
That
Yeah.
definitely helps a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, so
So
I can look in
So,
the
so Jen,
yeah.
this has been amazing. I mean, really, like you're
Oh,
great on
thank
all of
you.
these and the way you organize it is just fantastic. I
Thank
want to let
you.
people know that I will be putting up the link to Jen's website, Swim Stronger, if you are interested in private coaching with her, some of her other programs.
Yeah.
Um, this book is either in print or digital if you'd like to get
Yes.
books from her.
Yep.
She and I have just talked about getting some workouts put together, the differences between 5, 10K prep in the pool that I will be sending to the Central Mass YMCA, the one in Southbridge, for those of you who are
Yep.
local, and anybody else can reach out to me. That's a great complement to purchasing this great resource
Heck
here
yeah.
because, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
could you just talk about when you work personally with someone from a distance? Because
Yep.
you mentioned what you do. If you could just speak
Yeah.
about that briefly so people know
Yeah.
possibilities.
So what I love to do, if I've never seen you swim before, especially, or even if I have, but I haven't seen you recently, is for you to send me some video. It doesn't have to be underwater. I can do a lot with above water, you walking along the side, someone walking along the side and just doing a great film like that. I can mostly, most of the movement patterns we can see above the water. Um, and I can analyze that and send it back to you, but that gives me a sense of what drills I can assign you some drills and assign you some things to work on like that. Um, so what I do right now, I have a guy who's preparing for SCAR. So I'm making him, and he doesn't have a coach or anyone to swim with. So I make him 3 workouts a week and a long one. So I make him 4 week workouts a week, and I made him like an overarching schedule preparing for SCAR, and then we'll start to kind of do it specific for that. Um, so I can make a program for a specific gearing up towards a specific event, or I could also give you practices. But if you have masters that you go to, my friend Melanie that I worked with, the British woman who's blind, she had a couple of days a week that she did masters, and so we just made that part of the schedule. And I think I basically just I wrote up her really long, like I wrote up
Oh,
13,000. I wrote up like really long workouts for her because those get kind of sometimes hard to think of yourself. Um, so I can just write 1 workout a week. I can write any number of workouts per week, kind of depends on how much people need and how much they want. Um, and yeah, if you want technical stuff, we can do more technical. If you want, you know, just just tell me what to do, tell me the yards to do, and you feel like you have a good handle on technique and stuff like that, I can also do that. So I can kind of do as detailed or as broad a prep as you need. So
okay.
for
And you
yeah.
said you have two clinics this summer in Vermont. When are they?
So they're the end of July. I have one that's I've put together so far, and the other one is coming. Those are at in the Northeast Kingdom. They're a little bit south of Memphrey, where you're going for your swim. My parents have live in Groton. It's between St. Johnsbury and Montpelier. So
Okay.
it's really literally in the woods, but there's a lodge there that's amazing. And so we get the whole lodge, and they cook. This food is insane. It's off the grid, but not totally. There's a little wireless there, but not a lot. So we swim in one lake swim in the morning and one lake swim in the afternoon. And last year was the first year we did it, even though they had devastating floods the week before. But we
I
still
know.
managed. We still were able to do it, and some of the roads were a little tricky, but yeah. So there are a couple lakes there, and we have kayak. Obviously this is all very supported, and that one was more basic. Like we would just do open water in the morning, open water in the afternoon, have lunch, have a picnic. We did one night swim, which of course was like cloudy and awful, so it wasn't really a good sunset, but we tried. We had
Yeah.
light sticks. So we do kind of try to do a night one, but I'll gear it towards what, whoever is coming will basically kind of go towards what they're looking for. Last year I had people who hadn't really swum, probably hadn't really ever done more than 3 miles. So I think we did, like, our longest day was probably a 3 mile. We did like a 2.5 kind of big loop, to kind of push their envelopes a little bit. And those who didn't need that much, who didn't want that much, we took them back sooner. So we have enough kayakers, and my husband and I and my kids so we had enough people around that we could turn around when we needed, and really modify it. So yeah, it's really fun.
Right. That's
Yeah.
great. So, yeah, so thank you very much. I'm
All
gonna turn
right.
this
Thank
away
you.
and see.